Do you guys think that the Tyson Fury Anthony Joshua? Do you think that's the biggest fight in boxing at the moment? Do you think that's the fight that everyone wants? Because I was just listening to a clip from Stephen A. Smith, and he made a couple of points which I thought were interesting. I didn't really agree with him or disagree. I was just sort of hearing it, and I was open to it. So I thought I'd talk about it today, and let's talk boxing. So he was saying that it's a great fight, Tyson Fury Joshua, and it deserves the hype and that. But he was saying, as far as he's concerned, it's not the biggest fight in boxing. He said there's only really one deserving biggest fight in combat sport, and he said that's Errol Spence Jr. against Terence Bud Crawford. And I think that's a good point that he's made. And I was just cooking my dinner, and I was just listening to him speaking, and I had to kind of think that over for myself and make my own mind up. And I'm kind of tempted to agree with him, but sort of tempted to disagree, because I'll tell you why I'm sort of on the fence with what he said, because I think it's about timing the big fights, and I think at this moment in time, I think Joshua Fury is actually I think it's a bigger fight. I think commercially, I think as much as, and I've said it on this channel already, I'm dying to see Errol Spence and Crawford. And there was a time, especially before Errol had that horrific car crash, that's probably like the most fight I wanted to see in boxing. It was on top of my list, and it wasn't happening. Frustrating. But I think because of the time that we're at right now with the lockdown and where Fury's at in his career and where Joshua's at, I probably think, I'm confident, I think he's wrong in the sense that commercially, more people know who Joshua is than Fury. I mean, to be honest, I think Anthony Joshua is more famous than Errol Spence Jr. and Crawford at this moment in time. I mean, he's the heavyweight champion of the world. So is Tyson Fury. So I'm a Tyson Fury fan, right? So you could say I was biased. But when you're talking globally, Anthony Joshua, he's probably more famous than Tyson Fury because of the way he was marketed and coming out of the Olympics. Even though when you're talking about the fans, no, Tyson Fury is just as famous. But when you're talking about the layman or just the casuals, the average Joe who doesn't really watch boxing, they don't even really know about the sport. They just know who the heavyweight champion is, and obviously because Joshua's got all these different sponsors and you see him on adverts and billboards. I mean, Fury's starting to get like that as well with the deal that he got, which I think is brilliant, and I think he deserves it. But in that sense, I don't agree with Stephen A. Smith, because like I've just said, a lot of people don't even know who Errol Spence is. I've said to many people, what do you think of Errol Spence Jr.? And they're like, who's that? Or I'm like, what do you think of Crawford? And they don't even know who it is, unless they're like close friends of mine, or my brother, or obviously my dad, or fans, or you guys that know your boxing. So in that sense, I disagree with him, but I do agree with him in the sense of, the real hardcore boxing fan who knows the sport, amongst real fighting people and fans and all that, and all of us, Errol Spence Crawford would be a huge fight. It'd be a brilliant fight. But I'd have to say at the moment, I think Tyson Fury Joshua is the biggest fight that you could make in boxing. I can't think of a bigger fight. Can any of you, even Canelo, as big as draw as he is, who could Canelo fight at the moment that would sell more pay-per-views and be a bigger fight than Joshua Fury? I can't think of it. I could be wrong, but I just can't see how that, it's going to be huge. Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, for the undisputed heavyweight crown, two British fighters fighting each other. This is historic. When was the last time in Britain we had two heavyweight champions? One is a big deal, but two fighting each other for all the belts. Now, I got to disagree with Stephen A. Smith on that. It's Errol Spence Jr. and Crawford they're brilliant fighters, but they're not heavyweights. These are welterweights, and if you look at the history of the sport, just really going by how it's gone and kind of the unwritten rules, there's no bigger champion than the heavyweight champion. I know today things have changed a bit. It's almost like the pound for pound boxer in the world, the guy who, the cash cow, which is Canelo at the moment. He's kind of like the one who's regarded as the best boxer, but at the end of the day, there's weight divisions for a reason. Canelo can't beat Anthony Joshua. I don't think he can. And he can't beat Tyson Fury. There's no chance in hell. So you'd have to say that the biggest fight in sport at the moment, there's no bigger fight than Anthony Joshua and AJ. And prior to that, the biggest fight in the sport at the time was Deontay Wilder and Fury, and that's already happened. So AJ obviously is a massive name. He's got a massive brand behind him financially. He's just a brand, and obviously his profile. And Tyson Fury's huge now. Like, more people know Tyson Fury. Even people, right? I know people that don't follow boxing and they didn't even know who Tyson Fury was, but because of the mental health campaign that he did, which is brilliant, and him sharing his story, he's got so many more fans now not through boxing, but through what he stands for, and coming out and being brave and vulnerable and saying I suffer, with mental illness, and I've got through it, and so can you, and he shares his story and gives you some tips, and working out regularly in the gym. So that's grown Tyson Fury a whole other fan base that he wouldn't have had if it hadn't have been for that. And on top of him beating Wilder, that's skyrocketed him. So, Fury and AJ are huge now in the sport. And, and again, I'm sure there's a lot of people that wouldn't know who Canelo was. Of course, boxing fans, of course. But there's casuals out there. The average casual doesn't know who Canelo is. But they've heard. If you said Tyson Fury, they'd go, "Oh, yeah, I know that guy. He's the boxer, isn't he? Or he's the guy that had that talks about mental health." And if you said Anthony Joshua, people would know him. They'd be like, "Oh, he's the guy from the UK. He's the boxing guy. He's the Olympian." So I disagree with him on that. When you're talking about a marquee fight, and everyone's going to watch this, but I do agree with him in the sense that it probably will come round once Joshua and Fury fight. Then Errol Spence and Terence Crawford will probably be the next biggest fight in boxing. But it's not. I don't think Terence Crawford and Errol Spence is more anticipated. And I don't think it's a bigger fight financially, in every different way, shape or form. I don't think that's bigger than Tyson Fury AJ, because you're talking about the top welterweights versus the great heavyweights. And the heavyweight champion of the world is always going to be regarded as the man, because you are the best man on the planet. You're the biggest man, you're the strongest man. A welterweight can't beat a heavyweight. I don't think that's ever happened in history. That's why there's weight divisions for a reason. So, and you got to remember as well, what Joshua and Fury stand for. They're bigger. They're not just boxers anymore. They've got massive followings, and and they both mean a lot, obviously, to the people that follow them. They represent something really important. And I'm not saying that Terence Crawford and Errol Spence don't. Obviously, they've got their fan base, and I'm a fan. I'm a fan of. I want to see Crawford and Errol Spence. I want to see that fight so badly. But I have to be honest. If I don't like the analogy, but if you put a gun to my head and someone said, you've got to pick out of what fight you want to see, I'd rather see Fury AJ. I want to see that fight more first, and second, I'd want to see Errol Spence against Crawford. But that's just my opinion again. And you know what they say about opinions, everyone's got one. But yeah, I'd like to know your guys and girls' opinions. What do you think? But I see where Stephen A was coming from. I did agree with him to a certain extent, but I don't agree with him on that, this fight being not as high profile, and every single person, everyone from UFC, all the different combat sports, actors, everyone's going to be at that. The AJ Fury fight is going to be massive. That's why they're trying to find a stadium. You're going to get all different walks of life. Now, the only other fight I could think, right, and this is not going to happen, someone said on their channel, another boxing guy that I like, and he made a good point. The only fight that I think could be bigger than AJ Fury is if Mayweather came out of retirement and Mayweather fought Canelo or he fought Pacquiao. But even that's questionable because Mayweather's huge. He's such a huge draw and star and all that financially. What he brings in the pay-per-views, he always breaks records. So, but that's very unlikely. Mayweather's going to come out of retirement and he's going to fight an actual boxer, not a YouTuber. So other than that, I can't think of any fight at the moment now that would be more high profile and bigger than Tyson Fury Joshua. If any of you can, let me know in the box below. Again, like all these videos, I'm always willing to be wrong. That's why you got to be brave and speak your mind and say what you think. So let's talk boxing soon, and I'll see what you guys say in the comments.